1 week season.
1 week season, fam. La Familia, welcome back. It is FanDuel Labs week 15 coming to you, ready to build the lineup, coming off a crazy week. The wildest scoring we've seen for sure this year, honestly, in the last couple of years. Kind of a perfect semblance of events between the value running backs, not only coming into our lives, but bursting through the door with monster performances, and that coinciding with some expensive wide receivers finally waking up. And then, of course, Josh Allen, reminding everybody exactly who Josh Allen is with a historic performance. So quite a wild week in, FanDuel scoring and DraftKings scoring, just any level of fantasy. A wild way to end. It was the last week before playoff pods start for best ball contests for your season-long leagues. Probably your last week, so probably had some crazy matchups there. I know some of my leagues had some wild things going on. So and now we are left trying to get our feet back on the ground and prepare ourselves for another week. And now we're kind of back in a rhythm, a couple weeks removed from Thanksgiving, but won't be too long where we've got the Christmas slates going on and the random multiple games on random days. So yeah, a lot to consider. We're going to waste no more time. Bring in my good buddy Maximus. How we doing?
Looks like you're in a nightclub there.
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked. So, going through my closet this weekend. So this sweatshirt, it's from way back in 2014. FanDuel used to have their live finals in Las Vegas. This is before, in 2016, they had the all the regulations and stuff, and then Nevada made it DFS illegal, thanks to all the lobbyists from the casinos, who for whatever reason they think it's like a threat. In reality, they probably made a lot of money on those weekends, getting a lot of people who were into throwing money around out into Vegas. But anyways, it was hosted in Vegas. We stayed at the Cosmo 2 straight nights. They had kind of private areas set up in nightclubs. So that was a lot of fun. Interesting. So anyways, I found this in my closet this weekend. And so it's like, hey, I'll throw that on. And then I've been messing with my backgrounds. Last week we had the Winter Wonderland for my Wisconsin snow. So I was like, so I get a little Vegas backdrop and remind myself of times when my free time was spent doing those sorts of things and not, changing diapers, doing naps, picking up from preschool, all the wild things that encapsulate my life at this point. So, that's the backstory there. I digress. How was your week?
Mike reflecting on clanging the crystal.
Did I sound like I got more and more dejected as I went through that?
It's all good. I had a good week again. I mean, so I mentioned this in the Discord. I'm on I don't know if it's unbelievable or not. It is for me. I'm on a 14-week streak of at least one team placing in the 5-entry max tournament that I play every week that we've talked about periodically. I had a 30th place finish last week. I had the Josh Allen team. We talked about it on the show and on Discord. But I had Will Dissly in the Sunday night game. He got injured pretty early. If he just would have got 10, 15 points, I would have easily went to the top 10 based on I was just a few points under the people in front of me who had no players left. But yeah, to your point of craziness, when you're seeing 200-plus point scores in half-point PPR format, it was a crazy week in the NFL. So.
Yeah, and like I kind of alluded to, it just was like the perfect sequence of events with, Josh Allen, obviously that historic game, the same week that we have the Vikings. I mean, those three guys, even in half-point PPR, went for over 100 points between the Darnold, Jefferson, Addison. It's funny because you basically every week prior to week 14, those early games end, and it's like, well, if you don't have that stack, you're done. Like, there's never been like the assumption, I guess, at that point was kind of like, well, that's going to be the one that like you had to have. And it's just wild, and that's why sometimes we talk about don't worry about the players you're not playing, worry about the players you are playing, because just the way different weeks line up, you can often find a winner even if you miss out on a certain spot or a certain player. You still, I think, would have needed probably Addison or at least one of the Vikings with the Josh Allen lineup to take something down. But and I do think this last 4 weeks of the season, we're going to see, it won't be to that extent, I don't think. Obviously the Guerrero and Charbonnet situations were so extreme. Like, we haven't really had, I mean, it's been rare to see even like under 6,500, like a running back with like a full-time role in like even an okay matchup, just because they've been actively pricing up running backs. And as someone who drafted wide receiver heavy in best ball, like there hasn't been that many running back injuries. So like just those guys coming up, but then also Guerrero being in like the nut matchup and super talented, and Charbonnet being a guy that Seattle like leans so heavily on. It just lined up perfectly for where that went. But anyways, these last 4 weeks, I think we'll see more of that with, some teams. I think like the Jets, like if they were in the playoff hunt, I think maybe they give Bryce Hall a go, or they, I think he's probably going to miss this week too. But I think there will be more of these situations where some value opens up. And we focus so much on offensive injuries, but a lot of these defenses are either just playing out the string, or they're just like depleted, like they're running out of dudes. So yeah, I think we could have some wild game environments and some fun times, but got to kind of reassess our targets here, because it's, I don't think we're going to have many of the low scoring weeks where like 170 is winning on FanDuel anymore.
Yeah, I think the outlier may start to become common down the stretch here. We have one tomorrow night, possibly. It's not on the main slate, but the Patrick Taylor situation at Guerrero, who's already an outlier to two other guys. So yeah, it's interesting how that maybe those running back injuries, now that we're getting toward the end, the script will flip a little bit if you did the zero RB type of deal. But yeah, it's exciting on all fronts coming up. Drafters, if you're in a home league and you're in the playoffs, and obviously DFS, I have a lot of irons in the fire, so I'll be interested how these results play out.
For sure. All right, I am going to pull my screen up. This week, FanDuel has their $2.5 million WFFC championship. It's $1 million to first, $250 entry, $1 million to first. So structurally, $10,000 for 10th, $1 million to first. Quite the drop off there. So, from the, like you've talked about with your contests, like the structure, like just how like expected value wise, it's pretty good. If you do well, like you're probably going to do, it isn't such a huge drop off like it is with this, but I'll be dabbling in this, just that top prize, it's unlikely, but also it sure would change a lot. So yeah, we'll go ahead and build in here just for fun. Yeah, so I'll let you get us started. Tell me what you're thinking, where we want to start this lineup.
Gotcha. So amidst a lot of playoff contention and positional games this week, I'm going to go a little bit away from that actually to start this stack, because had a little bit of time to fool around just with some combos and some pricing. And there's definitely a pay up defense I want to lock into this particular lineup. Maybe jump the gun on defense a little bit this week. Just such a clear spot based on the point spread and team coming off the bye, and they have a lot to play for at this point. But the core I want to start with is a team that has definitely looked a lot better in recent weeks. They've pushed 3 of the best teams in football to the limit or overtime to overcome this team. And we have, unfortunately, one of those running back injuries to the rookie who never really had a chance to start this year, which leaves the main running back who's kind of been the workhorse anyway in an undeniable workhorse role going forward. So I want to start with the Carolina Panthers, of all teams. Bryce Young, Chuba Hubbard, and his ultimate security blanket, Adam Thielen. And then I want to do a bring back on the Cowboys of Jake Ferguson, who's priced down to 5,400. So a little info on all 3 of the, or every part of this core, and then I'll throw it back to you. So, I mean, Bryce Young, he's only had 1 turnover since week 9. He's thrown at least 1 touchdown in 6 straight games. And again, he's just looked so much more comfortable. Maybe this is the Canales effect, the quarterback whisperer finally coming into play here with this young man. And so Bryce Young looking good. He's back at home now, playing a team that clearly is depleted from that big loss on Monday night to Cincinnati. We'll talk about crazy circumstances on that one. And then we have Chuba Hubbard. So unfortunately, Jonathan Brooks suffered a season-ending ACL tear during the loss to the Eagles, so he's out for the rest of the season. Chuba Hubbard, just an undeniable straight path as the workhorse back, rushing and pass catching. And then we have Adam Thielen, who, we talk about the younger guys usually more here on the show, but this guy's still doing it. He's been targeted more than 20 times combined over the last 2 weeks, 11 and 10 targets. He's been right around the 100-yard receiving mark. Clearly, Bryce Young, even though you do have Leggett, not sure about Coker coming back yet, but Thielen definitely has the chemistry and the connection with Bryce Young dating back to last season. And then I know Rico Dowdle will obviously, I can't say it, be a probably chalky running back. Obviously, you can always target the Panthers with the run. But in this case, I want to kind of divert to Jake Ferguson. Jake Ferguson he was basically second on the team in receptions, receiving yards, and targets for the Cowboys against the Bengals last week, and kind of a security blanket for Cooper Rush potentially in this game. I think it has could be a sneaky shootout type game. And what it does, though, price-wise with these prices, kind of gives you a good base to kind of pay up at defense and then target some players or games that you definitely want to target where you have more of the playoff contention teams and players. So I'll start with that, and I'll throw it back to you.
Do I have that right? I assume you're talking about the Ravens?
Yeah, Baltimore Ravens for sure. FanDuel, it's more feasible to pay up for defense, probably more so than DraftKings. And the Ravens are just, it's a 14.5-point spread. The Giants, it's going to be Drew Lock or DeVito, and the Ravens have to win. They're 8-5 actually. They're 2 games in back of the Steelers, and they're going to play like a lot of games over the next 10 days, I think. So I would think the defense having some rest will be ready to roll to kind of control that game to kind of get back in the groove.
Yeah, so they'll play this Sunday, which is what would that be, the 15th? And then they play the Saturday, the 21st, and then they play the next Wednesday, the 25th. So basically they'll have 3 games in 11 or 12 days. I would think they will. A 14.5-point spread on the road is pretty wild in the NFL, but it's probably pretty accurate. It'll be interesting to see how the Giants play that out, because they seem pretty resigned to just it's like they're tanking without, the guys on the field are trying, the coaches are calling plays to win the game on Sunday, but they're pretty clearly, from a front office perspective, they've shut up quite a few guys down. Quarterback play is with the Daniel Jones release, kind of told us everything we needed to know. So, yeah, love the Ravens defense. Those high-priced defenses usually don't have too much ownership. And just talked about last week with kind of how last week played out and the expensive players at certain positions doing well. We haven't really had a defense like really go nuts very much this year, but this could definitely be a spot where like the Ravens D could just drop like 27 points or something. So yeah, a high ceiling spot for a defense, which is rare. So yeah, we got to see where we're going to go from here. We got 7,300. We've got a running back, 2 receivers, and a flex remaining. So then it becomes a matter of what are we going to do next with those 4 spots? The spot, obviously, we talked about the Bills from last week. They're in another game that is primed for a shootout potentially. And so I love Jahmyr Gibbs this week. Gibbs at 8,000 has a great matchup. Well, the Bills defense has been down a little bit. They've been giving up some bigger games. The Bills have scored 30 plus points, I think, in 6 or 7 straight games. So yeah, I like throwing Gibbs in there. That leaves us with about 7,000 per receiver. And then I'm going to go ahead with Amari Cooper. He was really close to the 100-yard bonus, 14 targets last week. Just the Bills really haven't had to open it up that much this year because their game scripts have not really required it. But when you look at this Lions team that's scored 40 plus points 4 times this season, Bills defense, clearly showed that a good play caller. Give me 1 second. Sorry, the little guy was pounding something in the background. But yeah, the Sean McVay and the Rams, like a good play caller, was able to kind of expose the Bills defense. The Bills run a little bit of a lighter defense, more of like a nickel almost, just like physically like smaller, quicker players. But that can be more susceptible to good play callers who obviously McVay did a great job freeing up Puka Nacua. Kyron Williams had a nice game. So I think that the Lions are probably going to run the ball and run it well. And I do like David Montgomery, but him and Gibbs priced so close this week. And I do think, like we saw in that Vikings game earlier this season, when it came down to it, like Gibbs is that guy that they don't really have to lean on all the time, but they can. So between him and then Amari kind of, 14 targets, kind of gaining trust, seeing how when they do open it up, he can be very heavily targeted. Obviously, we'll have to keep an eye on like the Keon Coleman situation. If he does come back, a little bit of uncertainty they do like Mac Hollins. So between Hollins, Coleman, Cooper, and Shakir, how exactly that receiver situation plays out, but also that's going to end up leaving you with like Cooper could see double-digit targets in the highest scoring game of the week. And he's probably going to be like 2 or 3% owned if Coleman comes back and all 4 receivers are on the field, just because no one's, there's that uncertainty in role. So high upside at a modest salary. I like that combination. So, what are your thoughts on that? And then we've got 7,650. So you could pick either a wide receiver or a flex, and then we can talk about the last spot.
Yeah, you literally continued my practice build script and verse here. So yeah, I also had that. Amari Cooper had a team high 6 receptions too on Sunday. So clearly he's getting more comfortable in knowing the offense. And I think Allen knows in a game like this, mass importance that he's a weapon that's going to most likely have to be utilized. So what I'd like to do here is throw Gibbs in the flex because he's a 4 o'clock player. And so that leaves us with a running back and a wide receiver. So one route I thought about was pairing Derrick Henry with the Ravens defense. That way, Henry's always really good in December. Bryce Young is quarterback. If you want to suppress Lamar's, output a little bit, can kind of take away from that if Henry's getting the touchdowns. And then that would leave us with 6,100 for the last receiver spot. And you have an option of either Calvin Ridley against Cincinnati, who that could turn into a game where Tennessee's going to have to throw to keep up, or Tank Dell for the Texans against the Dolphins, which could be another potential shootout spot. So that could be one route to go. And then you leave Gibbs in the flex with Cooper, and you still have exposure with the correlated skinny stack to the Bills Lions, which I agree. I think that game is another nuclear possibility. That's one route off the top of my head on the initial practice build I had. But if you want to switch, and then the other way to do it could be not Henry, but go ham on the receiver with maybe one of the Bengals, Chase or Higgins. And that leaves you at the running back spot, kind of in that Javonte Williams, Tank Bigsby. I can see Bigsby maybe not sure about Javonte, but Bigsby could maybe be viable. That would, maybe if you're doing multiple entries, you can kind of toss that running back kind of high end with wide receiver mid-range, or wide receiver high end with the running back lower range. So a couple different spots based on the salary left that you can be flexible and get creative. But what about you? What are your thoughts there for the last two spots? I think you're on mute.
Thank you. I think Henry, he probably has a good game, but also, like, to the point we were talking about before, they have 3 games in a short period coming up. And, like, they're just so likely to just completely handle the Giants. I don't know. He could have 120 yards and a touchdown in the first half, and they could be up, 20-6 or 21-6. And, do they put him on the field? It could be 21-0. The Giants might not score on the Ravens. Do you even put him on the field with, they've got, because they're still, the Steelers obviously play the Eagles this week, which will be a tough game. But their game this coming Saturday is the Ravens Steelers. That's basically going to be for the division, right? The Ravens are 2 games back. They have lost the first game to the Steelers, so they need to win this game. They need to win this game and then have some help, which the Eagles have a good chance, I think, against the Steelers. They're favored this week. So, that's a big one. So, Henry paying up for a guy in that spot, I don't generally – you don't want to assume, that teams are just going to dominate in the NFL, but this is such an extreme spot. I like the defense play because, the defense can't get benched, right? Somebody's going to be out there for Baltimore for 60 minutes. But Henry, they've probably got bigger plans for him than this week, is kind of my take on it. You mentioned that the Bengals, I kind of like T. Higgins this week. Jamar Chase obviously had the huge game on Monday night. And he's having a historic season, but Higgins has also been very good throughout the season when healthy. Didn't do much in that game, but things tend to swing back and forth. The Titans have a very good run defense. Cincinnati, if they win out, they've got a 5% chance of making the playoffs. So they're technically still alive. They'll still be playing. And just, Zach Taylor's kind of coaching for his job. I'm a little uncertain, week 17 and 18, what Higgins and Chase do, because they're both looking for contracts. My buddy he's very excited about T. Higgins. So this is a good sign. Write this down. But I think, the Bengals are near the top of the league in pass rate over expectation. They're doing it very well. The Titans are, kind of floundering, and we know that the Bengals are willing to just keep like piling it on. So with all that said, T. Higgins, and then what that leaves us with is we could put in Brian Robinson Jr. Facing a the Saints' run defense has been poor all season. Struggled with tackling. Robinson with Eckler out is kind of like the lead dog. And his salary, $7,300, is pretty solid. And they're another team that they've got a lot going on for the playoffs. They're trying to stay alive, make it in Dan Quinn's first year. They play the Eagles actually next week. So, I think Jaden Daniels, they probably won't want to, expose him to many hits at the goal line and stuff. So Robinson coming off the bye, healthy, in a good matchup. I kind of like how that fits. And I think it's kind of a similar situation to Henry, except for he's $2,000 cheaper.
Right, and also Eckler's on IR now, so Brian Robinson kind of has the backfield more to himself for the. And they probably won't throw it to him much, but he's capable of it. So I like that.
Well,
I like that adjustment too.
The game before their bye, they played the Titans actually, and he had 16 runs for 103 yards and a touchdown. And that was a game where they jumped out to a huge lead, or it could have been even bigger, but he still got there at his salary. If you get 20 points from Henry at 9,200, it doesn't hurt you, but it doesn't really help you that much for a 20-point score. Whereas Robinson, he can drop 20 even if they blow him out and his workload isn't, massive. He could still have a big game. And I don't think that they're going to he likes Brian Robinson too.
We're cooking.
I don't think that they are going to want to expose Jaden Daniels to hits that they don't have to in this game. So I think Robinson has 2 or 3 touchdown upside in this matchup. What say you?
I agree on the Robinson thing. And by the way, we do have $200 left over in multiple entries. You could always move off of Higgins, and for $100 more, you could have Devontae Adams, who seems to be heating up with A-Rod now. They are playing the Jacksonville Jaguars this week, who has a terrible secondary. And so that could be a viable receiver with some salary left over that you could pivot to if doing multiple entries. There he is. He had no comment on that one.
Yeah. Yeah, he's in the club now. He's overwhelmed. But yeah, I think, Adams is interesting. Another guy that we didn't get to just on this particular build, but if you wanted, I think Braylon Allen is in for a pretty solid week, potentially. He has, they faced the Jaguars. Last week, it was him and Isaiah Davis, which I think will be, they'll both be used, can continue to both be used. But I do think, if the game script goes where the Jets are able to control things against Mac Jones, it does seem like with Rodgers and just the way the Jets season has gone, they're still competing, right? They took the Dolphins to the end last week. So, I think it could be a chance where they actually control a game for once. And then Allen at, I think he's at 6,400 this week.
Yep.
So yeah, he could be I think he was 25-ish% owned last week. He could be a guy who a week later kind of bounces back. Gotcha. Is there anyone else, just quickly, any guy or two that you want to shout out that we don't have on this lineup, but you're kind of excited for this week?
Well, you can always consider different Bills and Lions to kind of mix and match, because I really think that, I haven't looked at the game total on that yet. I would imagine it's probably the highest of the week.
Yeah, by a few points. It's 53.
How do you feel this week about the Sunday night hammer between the Packers and the Seahawks? I find that hard with the spread out, the nature of one team and then the other team kind of being that Cardinals, Jekyll and Hyde type team, in my opinion. But do you see any merit to maybe saving a position for the Sunday night game, or is that game that's this particular week that's easier to fade, and you're not really having FOMO of the overall result of your team?
Yeah, I mean, Josh Jacobs has 8 touchdowns in the last 4 weeks. The Packers are clearly just like riding him. They run the ball at a high rate near the end zone. FanDuel touchdowns are a big deal. Seattle's defense has been solid, though. Like, even with 3 touchdowns, he only had 24 points against the Lions. So it's kind of a bet on touchdowns, but like he could be fine. If you did play like him in the flex, you have options then where like you could swap to JSN if you wanted. Kenneth Walker, I kind of think he's going to end up missing another week with that calf injury. So this is kind of a big game for them. They do play the Rams again. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that, but I think he sits out. So Charbonnet obviously coming off the massive week 14 game, only 6,700. If Walker does indeed get ruled out, and especially if it's not like a Sunday night getting ruled out, I would think Charbonnet will be pretty expensive. Jaden Reed's kind of interesting to me. He just the fact that he has 2 massive games, he's only 6,700, coming off a goose egg. So like people will be scared to click him. But yeah, I think those are kind of the angles from that Sunday night game that stick out to me for sure.
Yeah, and guys, definitely dedicate your time if you can to keep on top of the news, because it won't matter on DraftKings, but on FanDuel, late swap could become really important if Kenneth Walker is a game time decision and you have that spot allocated to where you can kind of pivot to a couple of different players. Charbonnet obviously would be much more attractive if Walker is out, but we may not know that until like later in the afternoon that day, or maybe even 90 minutes before kickoff. So late swap could become a really interesting aspect this week based on his status. So.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, the Panthers was not a lineup that like I initially was like on, especially as like a grouping, but I can definitely see it where you're getting a clear workhorse, and then Thielen, like you said, double-digit targets, and you're combining those, that whole offense so concentrated at a relatively low salary, and I wouldn't think the ownership gets too wild. It's a 13-game slate, so I kind of like that angle. Not sure if I'll end up there, but definitely one that theoretically it opens up a lot of avenues from there. And assuming it isn't like a super popular spot, like I think the individual pieces, because of the values might, and the on paper matchup, the Cowboys defense has struggled. They might be somewhat popular, but I don't think that many people will play all 3 at all.
One more shout out too regarding that game. I kind of looked up, and maybe another factor is in terms of average pace and pass rate plus pass rate over expectation, it's actually projected in the top 5 games this week, amazingly. So it's actually 4 or 5. I'm looking at just some advanced metrics, but another nod to the possibility of it being something that's viable enough to kind of and be low owned, to where some of these other players and defenses you can fit in. But yeah, I knew it was definitely more of one of my more off the board cores than what I've probably been going with this season. But that's good. You kind of want to get a little out of the box here and there, but it'll be interesting where the ownership falls. I don't really know either. I would imagine it'll be lower owned, but we'll have to see.
Well, and I do think it's a spot too. I really like Hubbard, and I like Thielen. Young, even though he's been doing well, hasn't gone over 300 yards. He's not really been like explosive. So if it is a higher scoring week again, he's like the spot that would worry me a little bit. But like we talked about at the start, with like there will probably be some value open up throughout the week. So if that happens and say, okay, Charbonnet is going to be chalk, but he's he's only 6,700, we can move to him off somebody else. And then maybe you can move up from young to a higher ceiling guy. So like, it's good to have like this sort of build that makes sense and that, you can see the story kind of playing out and how it shapes up. And then if you do get that value, that's kind of the way you can not ignore as situations change, you can react to them, but also kind of stay with the core of what you were thinking early in the week, which I think some people get too swayed by content and by late news and stuff, and they'll completely abandon, and then Sunday afternoon comes around. It's like, man, I liked all those guys, the plays that I was on early in the week, like did really well, but I moved off too many of them. So kind of combining those two thoughts, nice little marriage of things. So that concludes our look at Week 15 FanDuel 1 week season. My name is Mike. He is Maximus. Thank you for joining us. We will be back again next week. Best of luck. We will see you on Twitter. We will see you on Discord, and we'll see you at the top of the leaderboards.